Welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me again in the booth is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, sir?
I've got a question that I'm sure you'll be able to answer. Has there ever been somebody win a match-up after having 3 negative scores in their team?
Wow, that's really good.
No, I don't. Obviously, we have no idea. It's quite funny, actually. It's just somebody I know who constantly asks me these questions. As if we would just know that across thousands of matchups, like we're tracking these things. I mean, to be fair, the only thing, I think the reason he asks is the only one that we do know is the top score ever, who was actually this person.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I think he's just really looking for new ways to get into the Hall of Fame.
Is he thinking that we maybe have like the Ben Roethlisberger flip chart on the forearm of all the plays and stuff, and we've got every single stat there that we can just bring out, just flip it up, there it is.
Exactly. We'll just pull that out. We just have it all there at our fingertips.
Indeed. I actually have a question for you too.
Okay.
So what do you think is easier? Catching a very slippery rugby ball off your toes, or catching a bag of potatoes?
How big is the bag of potatoes?
I don't think weight comes into the equation, if that's where you're going.
Well, then this is a rubbish question then. It's just too many variables.
Well, I was trying to understand that as well. I can't remember who it was, but it was Elton Flatley. I can't remember who the commentator was. Elton Yancey picked the ball up off his toes, and if you've seen the Lions Blues game, it was torrential rain, just terrible, terrible rain. Awful conditions, and he just picked it up off his toes like it wasn't anything, and then just locked it down. Big wipers kick. It was awesome, just great bit of skill, and he'd be doing it all day actually. But the commentator said, "Oh, he picked that up like a you made that look easy, like catching a bag of potatoes." I was like, I think a bag of potatoes might be easier to catch than what he just did.
Yes.
You can grasp that, right? The sack, it's got Hessian.
It's not an ideal metaphor, I guess, is it?
No, I don't know where he was going. Did he start with bag of, and then it realised it was a swear word or something coming in? Or a bag of something that I can't broadcast. But anyway, we're recording this Sunday, 15th of May. We're going to review Gameweek 12 for Super Rugby for Fantasy Rugby Draft. We'll then cross across to the free agent desk and see if we can identify some players for the upcoming week and potentially longer term that may be available on the waiver wire. And then finally, we're going to check out the top scores managers and leagues. We're going to do a little bit of a different format in this podcast. We're going to try recording on a Sunday and then stitch together the top scores managers and leagues after we get the league table update, everybody's league table update, which comes through at around about lunchtime on Monday. So we thought we'd see if we can get this out on a Sunday. So we put our poll out, and the question was, which is our match of the day, which match goes last? And we had Waratahs Bulls, Sunwolves Stormers, and Hurricanes Reds. Who do you think? What do you reckon?
The funny thing about this for me is that I watched Hurricanes Reds and I thought it was a poor game and therefore was probably worthy of a vote. But I also watched Waratahs Bulls and I remember nothing at all from it. So is remembering one as a poor game and not remembering anything from the other, how do you kind of balance that? Yeah,
that's right. I think looking at folks, their response, they tend to agree with you. It seems to remembering nothing versus remembering it was rubbish is more apt to be match of the day. However, it was Sunwolves Stormers that actually won it by a landslide. So as of the time of recording, which is most of the South Africans are just getting out of bed, they probably haven't had a chance to vote in this, but we had 70% was Sunwolves Stormers. And I think that I think we say this every week, that's probably more to do with who let you down in this game. All right, let's crack right into it. Highlanders Crusaders. That was a belting match. How was it for the neutral? It was a bit of a shame I had a horse in the race because I enjoyed it immensely, but I think as a neutral you probably enjoyed it a bit more.
Well, I guess the question is for us are we starting to believe in the Highlanders because we were kind of dismissive of them. I guess you can't really fault what they're doing. It's strange though, isn't it? Because it just doesn't seem like something that you could be able to maintain, especially not over the course of a season, just making that many tackles, be willing to give the ball away and play without it. From a fantasy point of view though, it does actually impact guys like Elliot Dixon, who doesn't carry at all anymore.
No, he doesn't.
He is he's just a tackling machine, and that's why Dan Pryor's in the team. He's also a tackling machine, and kind of some of the highlights from the Highlanders' point of view were actually big tackles by Luke Whitelock. That was highlighted. He was probably up there in a man of the match performance primarily because of his defense. So we actually picked him out, Luke Whitelock, kind of tongue in cheek wise, but playing against his old team. But he did come good. But it's a strange one. There's obviously still going to be points available to the Highlanders team from this sort of counter-attacking style. But it's just going to be interesting moving forward. Playing against teams that like to maintain the ball. It doesn't. You wouldn't think on the surface that it's going to lend itself too well to big fantasy scores. No,
I agree with a lot of what you said there. I think there are some aspects of it. I think last week I was a bit more, and I think you're probably in the same boat, that said more about the Chiefs' performance. This actually says more about the Highlanders. I was very impressed with them. I actually thought that the Crusaders played okay as well. I think in matches like this, you've got two very, very good teams. It just comes down to the key moments and who takes them. And the Crusaders just didn't take them. Reid should have scored that try, and Romano should have had a bit more patience to let the Faddes play go. And then the Highlanders only had 3 chances, and they took it. They exposed, and they were very, very clever. They exposed they exposed the major Achilles heel of the Crusaders, which is Fonatier at centre. He just doesn't quite have the pace. Now he's got all of the industry and the swagger and he really wants to put in a good team performance. He's a good team man. He never really lets you down. But that Crotty selection just rang really, really loud. It was a mistake, and it got exposed 3 times for those 3 tries. It was the same person that was getting beaten, and it was to do with they'd identified having Faddes at centre. And having a little bit more pace to be able to get on the outside of Fonatier, and it happened. And I will disagree with you a little bit around the possession piece, in that they did play with a little bit more possession than what I recognise the Highlanders team doing and kicking it away. Now, the first 20 minutes they didn't. They were intent on doing that, but obviously they'd figured out that that's not working for them, and they did play with a little bit more ball in hand. But I guess going back to fantasy, I think if this Faddes at centre continues and Fekitoa's at 12, I think that's a downtick for Fekitoa. What do you think? Yep,
it is. And obviously Faddes looks pretty good. I mean, you are chasing points if you put him in there, but this is probably his biggest game of the season while playing at centre anyway. It's just kind of the nature of it. So, but that doesn't make him a bad option. Still worth having on your bench. Downtick for Fekitoa, like you say. I do think, as I mentioned before, that Elliot Dixon is getting a downtick now as well. Just not carrying. And then the rest of the guys, you know who they are. You're starting them.
Yeah, it was pretty funny actually. I don't know if you picked this up, but so the comms were massive on Whitelock. He'd made a couple of quite high-profile hits that were good hits, and he played very, very well. But someone had obviously passed a statistic sheet to the guys up in the comm box at about 65 minutes, and they realised that Dixon had twice as many tackles as Whitelock. They completely changed their focus from, Whitelock's playing well, but Elliot Dixon's in the All Blacks. They just went down that path. Someone had tapped them on the shoulder and said, you might want to kind of change your tune a little bit. The stats don't actually back up what you're saying.
Yeah.
I will say I'm pretty comfortable with both of these guys. I mean, that was both of these teams. I'm not too worried. The only thought was around Fekitoa. Highlanders, that's a big match. Playing in front of a sellout crowd, that was always going to be tough to beat. And the Crusaders, they were fine. They just missed out on the key moments. Anything more from this match in particular? I mean, we could have a whole podcast on this, and as we've kind of at pains to point out that we try and focus on the fantasy side of things and not get into things like was he wrapping his arms in the tackle or not. We want to focus on that side of things.
The only other thing, I guess, was we had a Tafua versus Reid bet.
Oh yeah, you crushed me on that.
I did. I crushed you by 0.4.
I'll be sending the invoice to Mr. K. Reid.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Rebels, Brumbies. I'm not sure how much of this you saw or not, but it probably tells you what you need to know. If you look at the front page of the player HUD for Gameweek 12, there's only one player, if you will, in that list. And who do you think that might be?
That would be the Brumbies front row.
Yeah, indeed. It's very telling, right?
Yeah, not too many standout performances from a fantasy point of view. The Rebels were right in this game. Pretty much the whole way through. Under just different circumstances, they might have even taken it out. So even the try scorers didn't necessarily put up big points. I think it was just the nature of it. It was just a bit of an arm wrestle. A little bit mistake ridden at times, and not particularly memorable.
It wasn't. No, I think I quite like Lea Leofano. He'd learnt from the week before taking that drop kick when it was a clear forward pass leading up to it. I think that was pretty clever. I also think now you have to know that from a coaching perspective, right? It's like whenever a try is scored, the fly half has to just sprint to the try scorer or to someone close to it and say, have you got any doubt? Is there any doubt or is there a problem? Or secondly, it could come from a buzz from upstairs, right, from the from the coach's box down to the water boy and just say, look, get that T out there and get the T out, but make him drop kick it, get it under straight away, because he missed the drop kick and he got 5 points, but it would have been called back, so he got more than the 0 that they would have got.
So I guess the questions people are going to be asking themselves will be around Mike Harris, and I thought he actually looked all right. Obviously, didn't kick as we expected him not to, and that is how it panned out. And I'm sure that will be how it's going to continue moving forward. But it's not that he's without value. Obviously, in the number 15 shirt, he's still going to be good, but he's just not that first or second round pick. I think that's what we were sort of at pains to point out last week. But that's not to say that he's not an every week starter as a midfielder, because there's not many guys that are going to be able to put up the kind of points that he probably will.
It's true. I have an interesting view of Mike Harris. So first, ordinarily, if a player was coming back from injury, you'd say, okay, give him a couple of weeks to get in the saddle, to get him up to match speed, match fitness, and all that type of thing. I think it might be a little bit of the opposite about Harris. I think every minute he's out there kind of erodes, or he's closer to an injury, or he just gets a little bit slower, or a little bit kind of taxing, if you will. So I wonder, I'm not surprised, I was surprised that he scored this many points with that kicking. 15 or 16 somewhere, which is decent. Pretty good, actually, to be honest, first come back. But I just wonder if it's going to regress a little bit from there, or that was his best, because he was fresh. Don't know. Just a view that I thought, yeah.
It sounds like so they just sort of wind him up, let him go, and he just slowly runs out of steam. He's
like the ever-ready battery that doesn't, not the ever-ready, sorry to the ever-ready folks out there, to other standard branded batteries that stop on you.
So he's there playing that drum.
That's right.
Then eventually the drumming gets slower and slower, and then eventually stops. So just keep an eye out for Mike Harris's slow drumming. You'll know it's time to drop him.
I thought we were in the crosshairs of a bit of a shocker actually after Jack Debrashini's first goal kick. Did you see that?
I did, yeah. It immediately made me wonder if we were going to see him relinquish that duty.
And I wonder if a few folks got a little bit nervous as well, seeing Reece Hodge drop kick off to start the game. But that appears to be his specialist duty. That he does the dropouts, 22s, and the restarts. So
I thought the other notable thing here was Tom English got some minutes, which is great, but Cam Crawford actually put up some points as well. So I think the assumption, at least a few weeks back, was that Tom English would automatically kind of come back into the team, and that might not be the case immediately.
It wouldn't, no, but I think Cam Crawford's out for the season.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure I saw an injury note. I saw an injury to say that he came off, and I saw a tweet from him today saying, not how I like my season to finish.
That is a good bit of intel.
Yeah, that's right.
Which you could have told me before we came on.
Well, we like to keep it fresh, keep it light, keep it all on our toes.
There we go. Okay.
I thought the other player back to that. So English is probably going to plug and play quite nicely in there.
Fantastic.
So yeah, just to finish up on that note from Crawford, it's a dislocated wrist. I suspect English will. It's quite good timing for the Rebels. They'll come in and they play the Chiefs in Hamilton is the next match. And one other player that I wanted to talk about was James Dargaville. He scored a few points in this, but he looks a good player. He looks pretty strong, and he seems to make those yards. And if he's going to be that 12 ahead of Tamua, I don't know how long Tamua's injury is, but he might have a little bit of value in there. Now, he's the opposite of what we like, right? So he's an outside back playing in the midfield, kind of like Marpo and kind of like Faddes, I guess. But it's not usually a recipe for success. But he looks okay if you're really scratching around for a midfielder. What was your take on Jimmy?
Well, he's not playing midfield, right? That's the point. So,
well, he did this week.
Yeah, but you said if you're scratching around for a midfielder, which he is not one of.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, pardon me. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's very true. But I just thought, in general then, what are your thoughts on Dargaville?
Not particularly enamoured with him. I think you'll be able to
bye-week starter.
Yeah, maybe. I still think you'll find better options. That this could easily be the kind of high point, the high tide mark of his season.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other guy was Aiden Toa, who put up 11 points and still looked shit. It was bizarre. I think you play him at your peril every week.
I actually think that, so I've been trying to think, because we get a little bit closer to the end of the season with every game week, which sounds like a Murray Mixted comment. But I've been trying to think of it, the odd podcast kind of theme that we should put together, for the wrap-up show, if you will, for the last kind of 2 or 3 podcasts after the grand final, and I think one of them should be a terrible rugby player but good fantasy point score, but scores fantasy points 15, like an Aiden Toa, that type of player. Obviously sold down 15, but I think that's got value because there's a lot of players that I don't think should be scoring points but happen to be scoring points. Right, okay, let's go to Hurricanes Reds then. So I guess the big talk most of the week was around the benchings and the curfew. What did you make of the horror film director / golfer, Hoosen? Not bad.
Yeah.
Good first touch.
Yeah. Great first touch. Yeah, he's okay. I mean, let's face it, we're not going to see him again this season, so I don't think it really matters.
Bit of local knowledge there, right? From that kick from Barrett, kicking it into the wind, knowing that it would bend back and sit in a space. That was quite good. But I've got written in my notes here too. Unlikely to see him here again. Hurricanes though made tough work of this.
They did. Yeah, they were pretty average for a long period of time, and the Reds actually were okay. They were, they sort of came to play. The other things I guess that I noted was on that Goosen try, actually, just really poor defence from Goromaru in there. Just at times, he looks really pedestrian. He's not a quick player. So, he'll be out of the team pretty quickly, I'd imagine, once Carmichael Hunt's back.
It's like Goromaru's dad's kidnapped Goromaru and just put him in a closet and he's playing fullback instead.
Yeah.
He looks the shadow of a player at the World Cup. I wonder if a little bit of it is a crisis of confidence. I mean, there were so many expectations on him. Bright lights of Brisbane. Don't know. I would have thought that Tokyo would be a bit bigger, but it just looks to have got to him, and he doesn't have that pace at all or spark. But I guess at least he was kicking his goals, and he's scored points as well. And I wonder if he's better for, that one match run out. And it's a bit of a leading question, and we can discuss about this in the free agent pickup. But what do you make of Chris F. Satir? Because he looks so disinterested at times on the rugby field. He looks like he'd rather be, I don't know, on Facebook. And then he goes on a barnstorming run that no one can get close to him. He's kind of like, if someone ever kind of lit a fire under him, he would be amazing. It's the opposite of like Kieran Fonotier. He's got all the talent and all the skill, but he just doesn't have the application. It's kind of how I feel about folks who have hair but don't do anything with it. It's like, you've got it. What the hell? You're just wasting it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think he must be a frustrating person to coach.
Oh,
because I bet on the training ground he's just untouchable. And then he just gets out there and just can't quite put it together. He's a strange one though, because I totally agree. And I've even read stuff in the past where they've talked about him and said this is going to be his season, breakout. He's got all the talent. and sort of doesn't put it together. His scoring this season's not been too bad. And let me just read out his scores, like 11.7, 13.1, 1, 14, 12.8, 12.2, 1.9, 24.3. So
that's a pretty good, actually.
He's only failed to get into double figures twice, and both times he got a 1 and a 1.9. Okay, that's going to happen, but the rest of the time that's pretty good.
Now that's sneaky good, right?
That's very sneaky good, because I've seen his name on the waiver wire a lot, and I just completely ignore it.
Yep, no, I totally agree. And maybe it's because of that hint of, I guess you're playing for the Reds as well. But yeah, you just got to look at the stats and say, that's not bad. And again, he's another player that I'll put a pin in, and we'll talk about in the free agent section. We're expecting a lot more from just for the Hurricanes in general, right? So from Proctor, even from Barrett and these types of players.
Yeah, we are. This looked more like, say, a Proctor performance from earlier in the season, where he is a good defender and kind of organised, but doesn't... We thought at the time, I remember going back, sort of after he'd come back from his injury, that he didn't look particularly sharp, and we thought that will come. This looked the same kind of performance, which makes me wonder whether the Sharks game was it the Sharks? No, it was the Lions game. Whether that was actually the outlier, and maybe this is the real Matt Proctor.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
At least in that position.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, Vince Arso not so great as well. I mean, Woodward scored well, and I guess every play counts, right? But if he hadn't have scored that last intercept, he'd be down in the single digits as well. That's right, yeah. For large parts of this game, actually, he was sort of negative, and it was mainly because of mistakes that he'd made. Yeah, that's right. Interesting to know, not for nothing, but Marshall kicked the conversion for Woodward's try, just in case anyone has to go back to a reference point later on in the season. Well, if in the latest episode of Barrett Kick Watch, still rubbish. Oh, God. Still rubbish. Wow. Some of those kicks. Yeah. I don't understand what's happening. I just don't understand. He's got the All Black fly half position in front of him to take it if he wants to take it. And he doesn't want to take it. No, he's not keen. He likes the bench. It's quite warm. No, absolutely. Maybe that's come on against a tired defence, score a try. Yeah, that's true. A player from the Reds, so I actually... Rugby Reg has been talking about him fairly regularly, but he hasn't had much of an opportunity. But it's 2 games in a row now. He looks pretty good. Campbell Magnay, when he gets the ball in hand, he looks like he wants to break. He's like a gazelle, he's all legs, but he puts some distance between players pretty quickly. He scored something like 16, 17 points here in a match where he didn't make massive breaks. It was only 2 or 3 that I can remember, but I think he looks okay. The only problem he's got is he's got Jake McIntyre inside him and a front rower that is trying to supply him the ball. It's not his only problem, but... Hey, we like gingers on this podcast, just like the rest of the podcast. I didn't say that. Assuming, absolutely. What did you make of Campbell Magnay? Did you see the same thing I did, or are you a little bit more tempted? I didn't see what you saw. It's interesting, because I did watch the game, but just didn't really recall him doing a whole lot. So, yeah, I mean, I do recall one of those breaks. I think he was brought down, maybe short of the line from. That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Other than that, no, not interested really. Okay. Now hold that thought, and I'll get back to your free agent desk. I did text you at one point during the Hurricanes front row, during Hurricanes red match, that I said that the Hurricanes front row must be in the first round pick contention next year. And then they missed like 1,000 tackles and gave away heaps of penalties to actually had probably one of their worst performances of the year. I haven't checked it, but it must be close to one of their worst ones. But what do you think of that premise? I know it's we're very reluctant to go on the whole front row to overvalue and can it be repeatable, but any team that's got Dane Coles in it. I think that's the difference, because I think this whole viewpoint that we have about front rows comes from perhaps our
traditional view from the NFL about picking the defenses, right? And of course, the thing about NFL defenses is that they'll say is the reason you can't choose them year on year who's going to be good is because the personnel changes a lot. Now, obviously, we're talking about well, like 7 or so. Well, it's more than that, isn't it? It's 11 players plus obviously the bench players that potentially can rotate around, and obviously the system changes and all. Basically what I'm saying is all sorts of things can change. When we're talking about a front row, we're generally just talking about 3 guys, and when we're talking about the Hurricanes, we're talking about 1 guy. So
yeah, that's right.
So there's a whole different kind of scenario. So yeah, I agree that there's the premise is fine, that you probably can guarantee.
It's a late first round.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to take them first. I think there's probably better plays. But it's up there. I mean, it's worth thinking about anyway.
No, it's not. It's not because we were at pains to point out there were 2 good front rows to get at the start of the season. It was the Waratahs and it was the Hurricanes, but we only had them down in 7th round or something like that.
That's right.
But
yeah.
You look at their points and that they're just so far ahead, and from an average point of view as well, they're really, really good. And from a week in, week out, how have they let you down? How they will? So I don't know. Just something to think about. I was just musing about next season. I thought it might be interesting. It might be. You're right. That's where our premise comes from. Is probably the NFL. But the Hurricanes front row might be the closest thing to a certainty year on year that we have. Like you'd probably pick them to be in the top 3 at least. But you couldn't say that about maybe Damien McKenzie and Folau, and that's why you'd probably have Hurricanes in front row at the back end of the first round. But that's all you're looking for in Fantasy Rugby Draft, is you don't want to blow that first pick. You want someone that's going to give you output. It isn't a bit of a hit and hope. You don't want to screw up that first pick, and that is as closest to a safe pick as you could possibly get. Now, I should say that you are risking a Dane Cole's injury. That's probably the nightmare scenario, but still, when you factor that in, it's not a bad safety pick.
But that's the same as any other position,
Well,
exactly. Get an injury, exactly. It'll happen.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, anything more from this match?
No.
All right, Waratahs Bulls. I would almost be keen to. Was this the most uninspiring 25-point win, or whatever the point was, that you've seen for a long, long time?
Like I said, I watched it and at the end could recall pretty much none of it.
So I guess the big takeaway for most folks is that Kurtley Beale looks to be out for the season. Did something with his patella by all accounts today is what they're saying. Straight out of the bat, I think it was 40 seconds in. Wasps must have been looking on pretty keenly at this after just signing the biggest money deal in Aviva Premiership history. Or sorry, that may not be correct. I think he's the highest paid player, but it may not be the biggest deal. Izzy watch. So played well. Scored a number of fantasy points, probably closer to what we like. I just wonder how much of it is hamstringing the Waratahs. He just looks so much better, and the team is so better balanced, having Folau playing at 15 and having those counter-attacks with Foley and what was Beale. Callaway looks okay, but he just looks like a winger at the moment, not a 15. I don't know what you remember of Izzy's performance.
No, probably, and it's not like I feel that I want Folau to play badly in that position, because I own Folau in a couple of leagues, so I want him to do well, and so I'd gladly be wrong about this supposed downtick that I've kind of given him since he's gone to 13. But I do agree. I just think that it's not his best position.
No, it's not, and I understand the premise of why you do it, but I think you should be prepared to kind of back off and say, look, it's probably not in the best interest of the team. Now, maybe that changes now that they don't have Beale to be that counter-attacker and take a lot of the weight off Callaway, which Beale was doing. And now maybe they have to have a rethink around and how that works, because they're certainly going to have to have a rethink about 12. And maybe it worked okay when they had Beale in there and Izzy together. Don't know now.
Yeah, I mean, if we just sort of kind of just muse for a moment on what that might mean if Beale's out. I mean, I guess there's probably quite a few options. Horrocks is on the bench. I guess Horn potentially could come in to the centres. I guess the most likely thing is Horrocks, because he's played in 12, and that's what they need to do. I think Horn and Carraro, they've played in 13 when they've come on, and so I guess that would make the most sense.
Yeah, I would like to see Izzy go back to fullback, put Callaway on the wing, and then Horowitz and Horn in the centres. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think they'll probably just plug in Horowitz at 12. He certainly came on, and it's to do with more the bench makeup than anything else. But yeah, they play the Crusaders at the Crusaders next week, so a bit of a tough matchup for them anyway. Anything more you want to say about this match? I don't want to dwell on it too much. It wasn't super high scoring for many of the players. No,
it's not. The probably the most interesting talking point is somebody who's not here, and that's what's going to happen with Warwick Hallant once they get back to South Africa. So I'm assuming this next week they're back in South Africa, are they?
Yeah, that's right. They play the Stormers.
Okay, so that's what we've been told previously. Izzy Moraes is obviously, he's not been bad.
He looked alright.
Yeah, even in this game he was okay. So we'll see what their thinking is.
Yeah, Creel got his hands on the ball a lot more as well. It just, there wasn't much. I think the only player that probably outperformed what he should have done was R.G. Snyman in terms of locks comparatively. He was really, really good. Picked up some points. He still was about the 6th best lock of the week or something, but that's not bad. He's a good plug and play option in that kind of 6 to 10 range. I don't want to dwell too much on the Bulls. I think they'll be a little bit better at home, but it's going to be a tough one against the Stormers. I'm not sure not sure there's going to be a lot of fantasy points in that, but we'll get to that. All right, let's skip over the Sunwolves Stormers as they were the match of the day game. Cheetahs Kings. So the weather forecast had actually lightened a little bit just before the game week lock, but it had been raining on Friday and Saturday, and the pitch cut up, but it didn't look too bad in terms of the handling. It wasn't raining. It certainly wasn't like the Blues Lions match, which was just torrential. Just looked really, really bad. Did you see much of this match, mate?
I didn't see any of this game actually. So that would have been my first question. Would have been about the conditions. Yeah, obviously that wasn't a factor.
It was a little bit of a factor. I think if you wanted to look at total fantasy points out of this game, I'd say you probably knocked it down around 10-15% just because of the underfooting. And a lot of players did slip when they were trying to step or cut or anything like that. But for the most part, no. And it just, if we flip kind of forward to the Lions Bulls, it shows you the points you can score in a rubbish match anyway. So it was more around these were just two bumbling teams. Sorry, Cheetahs Kings fans out there. There was just the Cheetahs were a little bit better than the Kings. Good to see Sargil Peterson. He was good all game. He looked really, really impressive. He came off with a bit of an injury though at the end. Well, not at the end, at about the 60-minute mark after he'd scored his try. But no, he looked dangerous throughout. Fred Zillinger looked pretty good. He came back to he went back to 15 when D. Neal came on to take over the 10. And Raymond Rule looked alright as well. He actually had a try ruled out for a forward pass as well, so he could have got a few more points. But I don't know. It was just a bit of a bumbling match, to be honest. JP Duplessis scored a bit for the Kings, scored quite well in midfield, but they play the Sharks next week, so I'm not going to be sitting here telling you to put in the players in your team. One player, the Kings front row scored 11 points, but Merritt Tooley, he's impressive. We sit there and wax lyrical every week, but he's everywhere. He's turning over the ball, he's making clean breaks, he's doing those yards, he's beating defenders. He is a really, really good player, and the Kings he's kind of their temperature gauge, really. A lot of players look at him and he just provides that energy and provides that go forward. Really, really like him. I think the last point on this match I'd like to say is we heard the fight bell again. Do you remember when we talked about the fight bell?
I do remember that, yep.
So I took note of the minutes. It's around about 57 minutes, 58 minutes. And there was a scrum collapse or whatever. And it wasn't actually much. It was just a bit of handbags. I think the commentator might have actually said you know, they were swapping shades of lipstick and that kind of stuff. But yeah, the bell came on. Ding, ding. It's brilliant. No one's picked it up yet. It's awesome. The commentators didn't say it, but I heard it in the background. As I rolled around it, I was like, yep, it's pretty good. I like it. It just breaks that where I'm in the middle of a fight. Is that a bell? Is that a bell? Maybe I'll stop trying to clout this guy. But yeah, okay. We thought there'd be a big uptick or a big win in this match for the Cheetahs, but they made tough sledding of it. Were there any other players in that match that we talked about on Thursday that Paul Skoman. So Paul Skoman got yellow carded, which didn't help anybody. Right at the end,
definitely didn't help me.
Yeah, I think it was mostly to do with his moustache, but it could have had something to do with his playing as well, and he was constant infringing. He actually wasn't the guy that was constant infringing, but he was the one that got tagged for it, just one of those ones. But yeah, he didn't actually look all of that impressive as we had seen in the games like the Sunwolves before. Opa Mahodji actually looked a lot better, and your henchman, Uza Kazim, looked pretty good as well. They were much better options than Skoman. They were in the play a hell of a lot more. And Opa probably should have had an assist actually at one point, but he decided to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to nobody. He did a skyhook to a guy that was supposed to be right next to him, and it pretty much almost landed 35 metres away from him. Didn't quite know his range. Let's move on to the Lions Blues match. You touched on it briefly that statistics don't lie, and it did seem the Blues regressed to the mean. I'm not sure how much of this match you saw. I watched this as well this morning on replay. They didn't regress to the mean. They regressed to the trough. This was bad. This was really, really bad. And dispiritingly bad. Like, the Blues have been preaching every day we just get a little bit better. You know, we're not going to build Rome and you know, straight away. We're just going to take building blocks, and as long as we're just a little bit better than we were yesterday, then we're going in the right direction. This was a massive backstep. There were some mitigating factors. They got hit by a bloody steamroller in the first 5 minutes, and they were down by 20 points. I think it was 19-0 after about 10 minutes. It was at a obviously that Lions match where they lost the week before the bye, it was too much for them. They'd obviously been bursting at the seams, and they played really, really well. But this is a good example of what you can actually do in torrential weather to still score fantasy points. So the pitch is already cut up in the Lions. We knew that about Joburg, but like, their groundsman is actually hindering what the team is trying to achieve, right? So the Lions are all about running rugby, ball in hand, and they've got a pitch that is just completely unconducive to that type of rugby. It's the opposite of what, like, the Indian groundsmen do. So you know how it's a dry turning track by lunch on the first day in a cricket test match? Mm. It's which suits their fast bowlers, suits their spin bowlers. It's the complete opposite. Their groundsman is just making it so much more harder work for the Lions to do what they want to do. You asked Visaneer. I'm not sure he'll be playing in the next match. And it's not. I mean, you can look at his fantasy rugby points, and you know they were pretty poor. But that obviously the two things that the Lions did well is they exposed Visaneer's defensive positioning. So they put a couple of kicks through that scored tries from in the first kind of 5-10 minutes, and there was a lot of pointing in that back three where Visaneer should have been. And they also were quite clever around getting Mapo to run the channel between Moala and Piers Francis, and that kind of shows you kind of the risk of playing a fly half at that 12 position is that you can get exposed by a hard, strong runner like Mapo. And Mapo was exceptional. He's a really good player, and he actually was over for another one, and they didn't show a replay, but it looked pretty close to him getting it down, but they were under advantage, so they just went back to the advantage anyway. But I would have liked to had a closer look at that. But he was the menace for most of the game, and it was just hard, straight running, and in the rain, that's such an effective way to do things, and they were smart. Yako Creel back to form as well. Really, really strong. A lot of balls in hand, but not just that, turning the ball over as well. And in this type of match, not much went for the wings on either side. So Kumbrink had a really, really low output. Skasane scored the first try, but it was only because there was a kick put through. Anything more from ball in hand is just they were trying to play from other position on the field, and so it didn't really get to Lee, to Nanai, to Kumbrink, and to Skasane. Lions front row pretty strong. They look really, really good again. So Malcolm Marks and Redlinghouse, and when the Warthog came on, they called him something else. They had an adjective for him, the hair. I don't want to say hairy because it wasn't, but he's got a bit of a stylish haircut now. So he's obviously been reading a little bit of the press and trying to move away from that Warthog moniker. Was there anyone else? I know you didn't see this match, mate, but was there anyone else that we were talking about on Thursday as someone to look at?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it. I mean, we did talk about Yankees versus Zalinga, and we did, I think, you might have actually suggested that all other things being equal, they'd probably score a similar number of points, and that's exactly what happened. I think it was sort of 20 versus 21. As it turns out, it was the opposite reasons. So they were
Don't show you're working.
They were similar, but obviously, if the conditions had been different, we probably might have expected a bit more from Yankees. So, you're not worried about Yankees, and he's a quality player, and so you start him. And no, there really wasn't much else that's worth talking about, especially from the Blues. I did note that on the Super Rugby website in their news section that the headline is, for one of the articles, is Blues coach Tana Umaga on the loss to the Blues. So they're obviously finding new ways to even lose to themselves.
I actually did see an article on Fox Sports that that notched up the Waratahs Bulls loss to the Blues as well, which I thought was quite good. Yeah, you kick you while you're down type thing. But you're in the ultimate conundrum now, though, because next week the Blues play the Force. So put a pin in that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But just to back to Elton Yankees, great player. Really, really good player. He's come of age. He used to be a little bit mercurial, a bit hit and miss, a little bit flaky, shall we say. But he's added so much more substance to his game, and he's right up there with the Pollards and the Lambies in terms of starting fly-off for the Springboks. I know they're forced into a situation at the moment. It's probably going to be Lambie, but geez, you could go too far wrong with Yankees there. All right, Jags Sharks. I thought the Jags were okay in this match, but the Sharks were just a little bit better. Just knew how to finish the game. Yeah,
just a little bit more composed, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Jags. Yeah, it actually was quite an entertaining game, and I guess I just find myself just naturally rooting for some of the expansion teams, and I did here too. I was really hoping that the Jags would get up. I thought they play a pretty fast kind of style, and they're reasonably good to watch even when they are a bit sort of all over the place. But they'll be kicking themselves, I think.
Yeah, they will be. Tuchelet looked really good for the Jags. There was a great bit of commentary from Hugh Bladen, and Coochie picked this up as well, where he said, "Oh, that's a great player. This Tuchelet looks to be a good player." Like, yeah, he's played 29 tests for Argentina.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Yeah. No, so I think anyone who was worried about how quickly Patrick Lambie would come back into it, don't be. He looked pretty good.
He looked very good. Yeah, almost. I mean, I know in one particular league where somebody ducked in and took him ahead of me, and it's looking ominous actually, because he would have been one of those players that somebody who was kind of onto it would have jumped in and stashed him away. And to have him coming back and in this kind of form this time of the season with the draw that he's got as well, I'm worried about good teams that have Patrick Lambie in them.
I know. It is too. And it's also the way that the Sharks play. Like, they'll take points. They'll take those 3 points. A lot of teams don't. They'll go for that extra.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you would struggle to think of too many matches this season where somebody's kicked 6 penalties. That
exactly.
Super Rugby, that is a high number, but it's not unusual for Lambie and the Sharks.
No, that's right. I don't know if you picked up on where Montero went. Did he? So The pitch, I don't know, it looked like a 1990s Ibiza with the strobe lighting. Did you pick that up? I don't know what was going on there. I assume he just assumed he's up in the club and just kept on dancing off the field. Do you know what happened with him?
Was this? He wasn't yellow carded, was he?
No, no, that was Pablo Montero.
Montero, sorry.
Yeah, so Montero, the winger, the big fella. Let me check that. You wax lyrical about someone else from the Sharks, someone like Daniel Dupree, and I'll check to see.
Well, yeah, there wasn't really a lot else to say. I mean, there wasn't. I mean, even somebody like Willie LaRue, wasn't involved a lot towards the end. I think a lot of that was because at one point in the second half, they had kind of 80% position, I think, the Jags. So the Sharks were really just defending, but doing it well, obviously. Players that we've come to expect, reasonable amount of points, perhaps sort of getting to double digits, like Esterhuizen was just completely anonymous.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, we'll talk about the Sharks midfield because they've got the Kings coming out, so we'll talk about them in the free agent desk. But just back to Manuel Montero. So he did play 18 minutes. I don't remember seeing him or actually anything happening. He's got no passes, no tries, no points, 1 run meter, 1 run. But the Jags named their squad to go to South Africa, and they named it tonight. Now, I did read a tweet earlier today saying that they were going to be rested. Some players were going to be rested for the June tests, but I looked through that team list and I couldn't see too many players, but I didn't see Montero's name there. So I don't know what happened to him, and I didn't even see him go off. Perhaps some listeners can help us out here and figure out what happened or do a bit of digging. And Vovo wasn't named in the team either in the Sharks coming up. So they had JP Peterson and they had Undungani on the other wing actually. And I think at one point, so Claasson's got ruled out just before kick-off in the warm-up. So they had Ungara come in at halfback, and then Joe Peterson came onto the bench, and it was quite interesting that they subbed Ungara off. Well, actually, I don't know, that might have been an injury, but anyway, Joe Peterson was playing halfback for a bit of time, so a bit of a string to the bow for Joe.
I thought he was all right. He slung a few decent passes.
Yeah, that's right.
You'd sort of think he might be tempted just to drop a couple at Lambie's feet, just to make him look bad and give himself a chance. But no, there could be a future there for Joe Pye.
Indeed. Maybe he's just branching out, upskilling, if you will. I think there is a bit of a theory running around, and I don't know if you buy into it or not, that Willie LaRue's best comes out when Patrick Lambie's playing. And I think the theory goes that he doesn't feel the responsibility to direct the team around the field, that he can leave that to Lambie, and he can run the ball in and attack that line a little bit more and be that kind of left and right type player to Lambie's left and right. What are your thoughts? This certainly didn't play out. So the reason I bring this up is because Willie LaRue didn't score any points in this.
No,
match.
That's right. Yeah, but like I said, I think a lot of that came down to the position. There could be something to that. We'll keep an eye out.
Levanini, goodness gracious, he was really, really strong, wasn't he?
He was, but he was kind of symptomatic of the entire Jags forward pack, that when they get on this roll, they're just constantly offloading. It's just like a compulsive offload, but when it sticks, it's awesome. It's really good to watch. They just don't seem to be able to maintain it for the entire, they just go through periods of intensity. I don't know if you don't sort of want to indulge in cliches, but it seems almost like a Latin thing where you get fired up and then you go for something and then you just sort of you go quiet for a bit. And then later on you might fire up again. And it seems that way even with the crowd. The crowd will be going nuts at times and then sort of, things aren't going their way and they go quiet. And then, at one point, I was talking about, offload sticking and the passes. They were giving it the Olay. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. It was awesome.
That's brilliant.
I hate it when your football team, when they start to get an Olay, because you're about to get a goal scored against you, don't you? I hate that.
No, well, what I hate is, I remember Arsenal against, I think it was Watford or Norwich or something, sort of 2 or 3 up, miles behind on goal difference, the teams were trying to catch, and they're passing it around and Olaying and stuff like that, and and then somebody came in and basically kicked Mirza Özil up in the air because he was just showboating. Yeah, and right. I was kind of like, I can understand. I would have done the same.
Yeah, that's right. There was a great moment. I can't remember. It was in the second half, and Blades, I think they call him, Stransky was calling him, Hugh Bladen, the comms. It was just at the time of Black Eyed Peas was singing I Got a Feeling, and the strobe lights were going across the field again, that there was a question mark that went upstairs to TMO, and just as they were banging out I Have a Feeling, Hugh Bladen goes, I have a feeling, when he was about to comment, and everyone just went silent, and it was like, wow. That's some sort of next level kind of dimensional stuff that you've got the commentator in his head thinking Black Eyed Peas. He just didn't know what was going on.
It was
he's
a subliminal thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that was crazy, that those strobe lights. Like, the goal kickers were trying to line up kicks and hookers were trying to throw the ball in. And they were getting strobes put over them. It was just weird.
Well, everything about where they play there is just a little bit strange, but not a bad way. It's just different.
No.
Like it feels like you're playing prison ball because you've got the cages up around there, obviously, to separate the fans from murdering each other and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's somebody with a laser light shining into someone's eyes, and they're probably attacking the team bus on the way in, all this kind of stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Check
your guns at the door.
Yeah, and probably they're outside the team hotel until like 3:00 in the morning, like the band playing just to disrupt the team, like all the old football tricks.
Absolutely. All right, much more you want to bring up from this match? Keegan Daniel, obviously not as good, but I think a lot of this is to do with these guys are away from home. This was their first trip. They'd just been away from home. They had one game at home and they went overseas again. I think they just wanted to get the win here. I think better things to come from these guys.
Yeah, definitely. Sharks, starting to look good. And the Jaguars, I still think that there'll be games, I think, where they play, especially at home, and they'll play like this, and they'll come up against somebody who's not on their game, and they'll run up some big scores, similar to that Kings game. I think that's not just a one-off. I think that'll happen again. And obviously, it'd help them if Nicolas Sanchez could work on his clean-out routine so that he wasn't constantly getting in fights every time he comes out on the other side of the ruck.
He's a scrappy little Latino, isn't he?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because, I'm sure I've spoken to you about this before, saying that the clean-outs that you see in modern rugby, 10 years, 20 years ago, it would have been a fight. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's this wrestling match. They land on the other side of the ruck, but then they just kind of disengage and they go back to what they were doing because you just couldn't. You'd be constantly fighting if you just took it personally every time. But Sanchez obviously, probably doesn't engage in that too often. So when he does get through, takes it personally and fight.
But for him as well, he's not very selective. He'll get up swinging, and if it's someone like Daniel Dupree, he'll keep going. He will get. Yeah. I've played rugby for a number of years, and I try and find the smallest guy on the field to have a go at. And anyone else, I'm hiding behind one of my locks. Yeah. It's just he's nondescript. He's lovely.
No, absolutely. I mean, it did make me realise how big JP Peterson is when I saw him trying to take him on.
Yeah. Let's jump into Sunwolves Stormers. I think the reason why a lot of folks had this as should be last or match of the day is because a lot of performers in the Stormers team let you down. One player who didn't, though, was Peter Steph Totoy. Now, this is 2 in a row now. This was even better. He just... Okay, back to the start. Stormers were poor. There were a lot of run-off-runners, no direction, and the only person that really was doing anything was Peter Steph Totoy. They just looked like they were expecting the Sunwolves to break off tackles so that they could just waltz through the midfield, and that wasn't the case. The Sunwolves played really, really well and probably should have won this, in all fairness. But Peter Steph Totoy, we got asked on Twitter by Metus, I think I might be. Apologies for how to pronounce that, but what is the best performance of a lock, and is this it? So Peter Steph Totoy scored 29.7. Do you think that's the top?
No, I'd imagine there's probably somebody that's done a bit better. I mean, Holloway might have even done better.
That's exactly right, 32.8. So
go.
Peter Steph Totoy was the number 2, Holloway is number 1, 32.8. And then the third, I couldn't remember who the third was, but the fourth was Peter Steph Totoy again. So yeah, in terms of a lock, playing the lock position, this was up there. Holloway obviously has extenuating circumstances playing at number 8, but I couldn't speak more highly of this performance from Steph. This is the reason they got any points out of this match, was because of him. And he's promised this for a while, but he just looks to slowly be. And maybe it's because his buddy Etzebeth isn't there at the moment. He feels a bit more responsibility that this is, I want to carry the ball more. But one of our managers, actually the top manager, Sam Konoski, emailed us and was asking whether it was Holloway or Peter Steph-Toy, and before the match, and we kind of said, well, it's probably still Holloway just because he's got a higher floor than Peter Steph-Toy. But Jesus, if he keeps this a second in a row, and that's almost a pattern, he was very, very good. Did you catch much of this match, mate?
I didn't see any of it, and so perhaps I'm in a unique position to ask a few questions.
Sure.
Are you worried about Damien Delende? He
I
has
wondered.
been. Let's face it. I mean, in terms of points, performances aside, the points have been rubbish.
Yeah, I am. I'm not worried about him per se, in that when he goes to play for the Springboks, he will crush the All Blacks or whoever's playing in that middle. He's awesome. I'm worried about how they use him, and I'm worried about the Stormers and the way that they kind of gel together as a team. They're missing a lot of players in that back line, and they just haven't quite got it right yet. I'm not. So I guess that's a long way about saying yes, really, aren't I? If I'm saying the Stormers have got a bit of a down tick and they've got a long way to go, they've got the Bulls next weekend as well, so that should be a bit tighter. But I think we're expecting. I mean, what was Damien Delende last year? 25-point a match type player.
Pretty much. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm worried that we're not going to get that. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in a match like this. Now, maybe if the Sunwolves are away from home, we'll be talking about it in a different vein. But from what I saw, a little bit worried about Dylan. He didn't make too many breaks, and he didn't look like he tried to. He looked like he tried to run over Derek Carpenter and run over Tatakara in midfield there, as opposed to a lot of his outside breaks that he used to make. Okay,
well, that's good. So the question that people are going to ask themselves now then is if you are a Delende Oda, it sounds like if we are down on him and you should be thinking possibly about trading him, that's what we're thinking, but I guess then the question will be is what you can get for him, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't be rushing to trade him. The only reason I say that is because I think we've highlighted the run-in of fixtures that they have over the playoffs. And maybe this is just a symptom of the whole Stormers team had a bad setup. Maybe they had similar to what happened to the Crusaders, and their flight had to go back, and they had to get a car back on Thursday night to Downton Dunedin. Something comes out of the woodwork like this. Don't know. But I wouldn't be rushing to sell him yet, just because he is that marquee player, and the fixtures come good.
No, I think that's a good point about the fixtures. Yep.
So you know how the CIA have a no-fly list for like terrorists and stuff?
I do.
I was thinking we should institute something like that, like a no-go list. Like, no matter what the matchup is...
Do not play this guy.
Yeah, unless you see them score 10 points, they come off the list.
I think I know who you're going to say.
There's two players. There's Van Veek and Kotze.
There we go.
Yeah. So they were effectively anonymous. And maybe anonymous does more clean breaks than Van Veek and Kotze. Jesus. They just... We thought the whole Kotzer on the wing might be a bit of a better position for him because he just tucks the ball under one arm and doesn't have any vision. But they just didn't get the ball. There is a massive problem with the Stormers backline and getting the supply lines to those guys in positions that they want to be. To be fair to those guys, they had to go looking in weird positions for it, but they just didn't look all that flash. And I suspect when Zas comes back, he'll probably slot back in again because at least he's got a little bit of something about him that can wiggle a little bit of room, bit of pace. But yeah, again, I'm pretty keen to institute this no-go list. Yamada was good. Yamada was alright. I was
going to say that the Yamada thing, I mean, this is a real thing. This guy is a player.
He's a top try scorer.
Yeah.
Top try scorer, Super Rugby try scorer.
That's right. And he's way up there in terms of fantasy points. So I know that there's, over the season, and I've seen it myself, and probably even tried to do it myself, was that take him and look at the points and then try and trade him and go, oh, look how many points this guy scored. Where really you're thinking to yourself,
I know.
Actually, I don't rate him, and I'm trying to get something good for him.
Yep.
I think we can kind of dismiss that now. He actually is a good player.
No, he is. And this was a really tight match as well, so there wasn't many standout performers in terms of Fantasy Rugby Draft points. But and he actually scored another try, so you probably wouldn't have seen this if you just look at the highlights. There was a try that he scored, and PC was just about to take the conversion, and it went up on the big screen. Now, it looked dodgy to the naked eye straight from as soon as it happened. It looked very average, but the AR seemed pretty convinced that it was a try. I'm not sure what he was looking at because it was right in front of him, 2 metres away, and it was clearly a double movement and the right call. But if you'd lost by 5 points this week, then you can probably blame Tusapisi for not drop kicking that as quickly as he could, because he was short, and he was well short, and even in the double movement it looked like he might not have even made it over the line. So yeah,
I wonder whether I was just going to say, I wonder whether fly halves or goal kickers just generally will start practicing taking these drop kicks at goal, because if they're going to do it, you still want to get the points out of it. It's not like you're just trying to kick it away, right? But I bet it's something that they don't practice. So maybe I
totally agree.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the sevens guys do it, but these guys probably don't.
No, look, 100%. This has to be now part of coaching 101 for Super Rugby.
Yep.
Until they fix the whole don't show a replay until the conversion, this is going to happen. I mean, you see it in Premier League and other sports as well, is that any kind of decision or goal or offside or anything that's kind of contentious, they actually don't show it a lot of the time in the home ground. No, I don't think we need to go there. I think there is a time when you can show it, but it can't be so influential as to making a decision like this. This needs to be sorted out a little bit better.
Yep. But if it's inevitable that you're going to get one of these towards the end of a game, and the conversion is going to be something that matters.
Yeah.
And then someone's going to have to be taking one quick, but, with the intent of actually getting it. Because we saw a couple, I think there was one from Liliafana where I think he kind of just smashed it.
Yeah.
In the direction of the post without any real intent. You know what I mean? So, at some point, it's going to become a thing.
And I wonder, now this is an extension, how's this for joined up thinking? I wonder if that makes Reece Hodge more valuable because he takes the kickoffs. How do you like that for forward thinking?
I do, yeah. You just mentioned subbing in just to take the quick
exactly. Any controversial tries that potentially are scored, the inverted commas T gets thrown to Reece Hodge.
There you go.
That's a cheap one for you for the man at the Rebels. All right. Anything more from this match? Any players that we were talking about that maybe we wanted to highlight in this game?
No, I don't think there were. For me, there was an article during the week in the New Zealand Herald talking about how the expansion was a failure and it was a bad idea, and the rugby union had tried to sell the public on this, pull the wool kind of thing. It's good to see results like this that I think prove that that's just rubbish.
Yeah. I was going to start with the whole... Right, I assume everyone that was saying Sunwolves out are now saying Stormers out.
Yeah.
Theme.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's ridiculous. But no, you're right. Look, it's going to take time. And I should shout out to Nathan Major, to be fair. The Sunwolves defence has improved, certainly in this match. The Stormers did not throw too much variety at them, but they certainly threw stuff at them. Then they held. And they didn't have those kind of dam-breaking moments that they have had in previous games. Now, I'm not going to say that's never going to happen again, but certainly shout out where it's due. All right, let's jump across to the free agent desk. I guess there's a few matches here that we probably need to talk about. So in terms of highlighting some free agent players, I guess a lot of people are going to be trying to find replacements for Kurtley Beale is probably one. I'm not sure you're going to be looking for replacements for Cam Crawford because Tom English was already fairly well owned and he's likely to slot into that position. But looking at midfield options, so the Lions have a decent matchup, the Sharks have a decent matchup, and the Reds play the Sunwolves in Brisbane.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I was asking you to put a pin in a few things.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wondering now how much value Campbell Magnay, Chris F. Satia, and even Goromaru will have playing the Sunwolves. Because I think the Sunwolves are a different beast at home. Do you see what I did there? The Moondogs?
Mm-hmm.
Wolves, beast?
Clever.
Yeah, it's not bad. We should do this on Sunday night more often. I've been drinking a lot. Yeah, so Campbell, these guys, what's your thoughts on perhaps these guys do have value for this week?
I see. So when you said the Reds match up, you weren't talking about the team.
No,
Okay.
no, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is a very good matchup for the Reds. My impression has been that they have been improving, and I think the Hurricanes sort of result, or at least the way they played, kind of backed that up. And this has been happening for 3 or 4 weeks now. You know, they looked like the worst team in the world through the first few weeks of the competition, but I think they've definitely turned things around. So I think all those players, Goromaru.
Yeah, you're humming and hawing, but let me stop you there before you open your mouth on Goromaru, because I've got another theory on that. You know your whole Luke Whitelock theory and the whole Ryan Viljoen theory? That's my Goromaru theory. He's playing against the Japanese. He's going to want to play well.
Yeah, no, I totally got that. Thank you for pointing out to me that he's Japanese. It's just completely bypassed me. Yeah, but at the same time, it's Goromaru, and as we pointed out, well, what do we expect from? Is Carmichael Hunt?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know actually. It seemed to come last minute, so maybe it is just a 1 week thing. Don't know. That is probably your first question to find out.
But while we're on theories though, right? The Reds, they want a full house. They want media coverage. We already know that they've got a lot of press from having Goromaru even turn up at the club,
selling jerseys. Yep.
Selling jerseys, playing against the Sunwolves. Maybe Carmichael might,
There's going to be a lot of Campbell Magno fans in Tokyo after the weekend, you reckon?
Of course. I'm sure there probably already were.
Maybe. So I think you could just check to see your waiver. Probably Chris F. Satir is the most likely person out of that bunch that is probably going to go quite well, but I personally wouldn't go away from Campbell Magno. He looked okay, and if you're scratching around for a midfielder, he's not a bad option. Rohan van Rensburg, he played, or Yanzi, I think actually his first name is. Rohan's obviously come through from Opta, but
Jensa, I think, is it?
Jensa. Yeah, that sounds about right. I think there's going to be 2 teams that really want to hold on to the ball, Lions, Hawaii's. So, and he played well this week, Van Rensburg. He did play well, and he looked quite blockbusting. And again, maybe it was the rain that he ran. You know, the big guys running straight lines, or really good lines. It was really tough to tackle, but we liked him as well. Now, I don't know if it's if you're looking a little bit longer term, players like Andre Esterhuizen and Paul Jordan are probably more likely, just because of their fixtures. Now, they do play the Kings this week as well, but I do wonder how much of a Kings Sharks gets into a little bit of a grind. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm expecting from that match, but if you want to look at Esterhuizen's been really good up till now. He wasn't wonderful against the Hawaii's, or as you said, Mossman actually is probably more likely anonymous. But that was more to do with position of the Hawaii's. I think those guys are some decent options. Have you got any other free agents? I've got a couple more.
It was somebody that was on the drop list last week, and I guess we probably don't look at it necessarily and think, "Oh, this is a great matchup." But Force Blues, I mean, I think the Force have actually got a reasonable record against the Blues at home. At least I remember games where there'd been a lot of points scored. If John O'Lance is not back, then I guess you'd suggest that maybe Ian Pryor might get that job again, and that might not be a bad option.
So where do you think that comes down with Peter Grant? Because he's now back fit. Do you think that is Pryor's 10, or do you think it's Grant's?
I don't think that Pryor is doing a worse job.
Yeah.
For what that's worth.
Yep. Yeah. No, indeed. And certainly it's worth a roll. It's worth a rostering, at least, to see if that does pan out. So a player that was on our, and exactly what you said, he was on the cut list last week, but Tony Pulu. I checked to just see if he was dropped, because they have the Rebels this week. And longer term, to be honest, that I suspect the Chiefs will correct the match they had against the Highlanders. I don't expect to see that type of performance get them, and then they'll have Seta Tamanavalu back as well. I suspect Pulu, it'll be a decent pickup.
No, totally agree. I think the week off they would have been at Ruakura, the training ground, and I would imagine they would have got a rocket based on that performance. And we saw with the Lions, a week off after a bad performance, come back. Wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs would do something very similar here.
You know what I'm worried about?
Nuclear war.
That's a long list. Yeah, world peace, starvation, Ethiopia. Yeah, right. No, I'm worried that I've seen a number of articles suggesting that Tana Umaga is going to make some decisions, and people are going to feel the axe after that performance. And one of them being Vicinere is the obvious one that a lot of journos have been drawing a line on. And I 100% agree that he seems to be in that team at the moment, basically for size and his big boot. And I think actually Milani Nanai is a much better 15 at the moment, and he certainly proved that in the ITM. But what I'm worried about is that Tana Umaga might, because there just isn't that many options and outside backs for the Blues. If you've got Ben Lamb out for the season, Uncle Rico's off playing in Paris, or he'll be at Twickenham next max, is that Nanai goes on one wing, Jet Li stays on the other, and we see Matt Duffy. That's what I'm scared of against the Force. I'd much prefer to see Nanai at fullback and someone drifting off, maybe even Moala coming out into the wing and Sau coming into centre. But I'm really worried that Matt Duffy actually might all of a sudden get some game time here. Yeah.
Wow, okay. It's not quite up there with nuclear war, but yeah, Matt Duffy will be wondering what the hell he's done wrong now, what he's done to you.
Exactly. Smash cut to him sitting there listening on his iPod going, hey, what have I done?
Yeah, exactly.
Any more free agency you want to look at this week? There's a few good matchups. I'm trying to stay away from, I think it'll be fairly tight with Waratahs, Crusaders and Stormers, Bulls. I think the other matches have at least a variety of attacking flair in them.
Red's front row, I think, could be interesting this week. I know it's obviously part of our theory about playing his Sunwolves, but it's not just that. Andrew Reddy, the hooker,
that's right.
He gets around. He gets around. And
turns the ball over too.
Yeah, he does. And the rest of them, James Slipper, they're pretty solid. Scrum's not terrible. They probably go okay.
They put up points this week too. So it's not just pulling them out of obscurity off the bottom of the pile. These guys have been doing well in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
It's good call. All right, so that's probably the time we have for the free agent desk. Just before we go, we're going to chime in from the future after the league table has been updated in your league with the top score managers and leagues. So the top score after for Gameweek 12 was Mr. Ray Edmonds with 211.5. Well done, sir. Team The Bouncers, congratulations. The top 5 leagues after 12 game weeks. Number 5, the Turtles 2016 comp. Number 4 is Dave's Dickheads. Number 3, the Highveld Bowl. Number 2, Chip and Chase. And number 1 again, the B&B League. Congratulations, lads. Going well. And the top 5 managers after 12 game weeks. I think we've explained how these are calculated, but it's based on your points for, and then it's indexed based on the strength of your league. So number 5 is Andre Muller. Number 4 is Luke Crombie. Number 3, Justin Vermeulen. Number 2, Franco Duplessis. And number 1 again, Mr. Sam Konoski. Congratulations, Sam. Magnificent effort. Three weeks in running, I think that is. A little bit of admin. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rugby Draft. That's Fantasy OG Draft. Follow us on Facebook if you want to get those team news and see those coming through later on in the week. Or you can send us a mail at support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. Now, I know that's been very, very popular with a lot of managers who don't want to do anything in the public forum. So happy to field them there. We're manning the phones as we speak as it comes to the crunch time. Mossman's at Nathan Mossman. That's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
I hate Paul Skinner.
Del Tio Rapido.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a